The following presentation is brought to you by Amazing Discoveries. To see this entire video, please contact amazingdiscoveries.org.
I've titled this lecture 1844 and the Final Onslaught. You've probably realized by now that the final onslaught is against Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ is often attacked in the form of his people as well. And so we have to deliberate this question of 1844. See, 1844 is the date of the end of the 2,300-day prophecy. And according to this prophecy, at the end of the 2,300 days, there will be a cleansing of the sanctuary. That means judgment will be announced, and there will be a people to announce that judgment. And we have seen in Revelation chapter 10 how through the unsealing of the book, the Seventh-day Adventist Church started preaching the judgment hour message. And then we saw that the message has the components of the three angels. And we went through the three angels' messages. And these messages are to be the final warning to the world. And they will reach a crescendo when the powers of the world close in on the system, and they will reach a loud cry going to the world, laying bare the sins of Babylon, and people will be asked to come out of Babylon. So 1844 is an important yardstick in prophecy, and 1844 also gives credence to this final message and who presents it. Remember prophecy, a day is a year, and 7 days would be 7 years. I've appointed you each day for a year. Ezekiel, after the number of days in which you search the land, 40 days each day for a year. Numbers 14:34. And we discussed this vision in Daniel chapter 8, where the time of the end is when this vision will be unsealed. How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the hosts to be trodden underfoot? 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end to sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Daniel 9:24. Now this whole vision is the vision of the coming of Christ, the first part, culminating then in 1844. A date that is just hanging in the air, but which has great significance. Now I'm not going to deal with this part of the prophecy. There is a whole video called The Messiah. But the first part, just to briefly state it, dealt with the coming of the Messiah from the issuing of the decree to when the gospel went to the Gentiles, 34 AD, and the rabbis issued this curse. May the bones of the hands and the bones of the fingers decay and decompose of him who turns the pages of the book of Daniel to find out the time of Daniel 9:24-27. And may his memory rot from off the face of the earth forever. Not a very nice curse. This is Talmudic law. This is in the Talmud. Talmudic law, page 978, section 2, line 28. So obviously the rabbis didn't want anyone to recognize that Jesus was the Messiah, because that would be a problem for the Jewish religion. So it's a very sad fact that this 2,300-day prophecy, where the first portion identifies the Messiah, should be under such a curse. Can you imagine, or do you think it's possible that the last part of the same prophecy, which introduces a people who will want to set Jesus Christ back into his rightful position, would also be under a curse? Is it possible? Don't you think that's possible? I think the devil hates this prophecy more than any other, because it reveals in the first part of the prophecy who Jesus Christ is, that he is the Messiah, and in the last part of the prophecy, it reveals a people that will preach the everlasting gospel to the world and set Jesus back in his rightful position. So there's a total onslaught on the first part, there's the curse. There's a total onslaught on the last part as well, because Jesus must be eliminated from the hearts and minds of the people. 1844, a judgment message was to go to the world, and the sanctuary message was again uncovered and understood. And the fullness of the sanctuary, the white linen, as we have said, the righteousness of Christ surrounding anyone who enters the door, and the sacrifice and all the issues of the sanctuary. Hebrews 8 verse 1 and 2, we have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched and not man. So is there a heavenly sanctuary according to Hebrews 8? Yes or no? Yes. Now this doctrine of the heavenly sanctuary, where Christ is officiating as high priest, is a doctrine which is heavily under attack in the world. Why? Because it sets Jesus Christ back into the center as the only Savior in the world, and it also tells us about his ministry. And where he is officiating in the holy or the most holy is very important. Because according to Seventh-day Adventist doctrine, 1844, time of judgment must be Yom Kippur. He must have gone into the most holy. Now, if that is so, then the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a peculiar message to the world. One explaining the sanctuary, number one, the ministry of Jesus, the judgment hour, but it also makes them the herald of the final message. That's a problem. You can't have one denomination being a herald of a final message. You have to take that denomination away and make it part of the pot of ecumenism. Nobody has the right to say, we have a final message for the world. That would be exclusivity in the thinking of the world. So 1844 is heavily under attack. And the doctrine that Jesus Christ entered the most holy in 1844, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, anti-typical Day of Atonement, is also heavily under attack. Hebrews 9 verse 3, and after the second veil, the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all. Now, holiest of all here in the Bible is Hagia Hagion. That's what it says. Holiest of all. And Paul here uses this word Hagia Hagion for the most holy. And it's definitely after the second veil. Very important. So, the word Hagia Hagion is used for after the veil. So unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, Daniel 8:14. 457 BC, the decree went out. 1844 is the date when you add the 2,300 years. The first part of the prophecy here, divided into 70 weeks, cut off from this, fits the Messiah so perfectly that the Jews, the rabbis, have cursed anyone who studies it, lest they find the Messiah. Now what about this 1844? Is this the judgment herald? And is there a particular group of people coming out of a great disappointment who will preach this message? And they will keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus? But Christ, Hebrews 9, 11 and 12, but Christ being come a high priest by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. That's the King James Version. And it has translated this passage here as holy place. Christ, being come a high priest by his own blood, entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. And the word used there is Hagion, holy place. Actually, hagion doesn't necessarily have to mean holy place. It could just mean sanctuary. The King James Version has turned it into holy place. So the fact of the matter is, when Jesus died and he was resurrected, he went into the sanctuary. Now, where did he serve after he went into the sanctuary, if there is a heavenly sanctuary? Well, according to this, he went into the sanctuary and he must have gone into the holy place. That's the King James Version. Now, if he went into the holy place upon his resurrection, that means that according to the Jewish type, sometime thereafter, whenever that is, he must go from the holy into the most holy. Isn't that right? Sometime thereafter, whatever that time is. Now, we don't know what time that is, except we have one prophecy which says after 2,300 days, then will the sanctuary be cleansed. That means we have a date, 1844, when he could go into that holy place, or the most holy place. That's the only prophecy there is. So, did he enter into the holy, or did he enter into the most holy when he went up to heaven? He's become a high priest by his own blood, having attained eternal redemption. 7 annual Jewish feasts and types and antitype. Remember we did them, the Passover, the unleavened bread, the first fruits, when Jesus died, laid in the grave, and was resurrected, a Feast of Weeks, Pentecost. And when he came the first time, he paid the price for sin. That's what he did. Then the 7 annual feasts, we talked about them, the trumpets heralding judgment. That would be the Second Advent movement. That would start in 1844, if it is true. Day of Atonement, pre-Advent judgment, and tabernacles. So this is where we are living today. And 1844 is a powerful cutoff date. Homegoing. Harvest of redemption. So when Jesus came the first time, he paid the price for sin. Did he take us all away from this terrible planet? Yes or no? No. When he comes a second time is the harvest of redemption. Then all the saved will be taken up to him. And the Day of Atonement was the annual cleansing of the earthly sanctuary. So basically, the doctrine says that since 1844, because that's the only date we have been living in what the Bible calls judgment hour. So, 1844, judgment hour, then the end of the world, then comes eternity. At that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of thy people. There will be a time of trouble, and the people will be delivered, that are found written in the book. But remember, Daniel shut up the words because they are for the time of the end. Now, we dealt with this when we dealt with the lecture on Revelation chapter 10. So, I'm not going to go into great detail again. Suffice to say that the time of the end was defined there as from the end of the 1,260 days, 538 AD, papal supremacy, 1798, and from that time onwards, the 3 angels' messages would go to the world. Now, do you know what's fascinating? Is that the world has changed some of these criteria. For example, they are saying that Christ did not enter into the holy place, but that he entered into the most holy place. And if you have a New King James Bible, it actually says that. The New King James Bible changed the wording where the King James had it, holy place, changed it to most holy place. But here's a problem. Because most holy is hagia hagion, and it only says hagion. So it doesn't say hagia hagion. So why would they change it? You see, if Jesus went into the most holy when he was raised from the dead and went to heaven, then there is no special circumstance around 1844. Do you understand that? Whereas, if Jesus went into the holy, well, then 1844 becomes prominent, and there is a special message and a special people to give it. So 1844 must be rubbed out, removed. And there are whole movements to remove it. Terrible movements. Now my question is simple, and this is this. If Jesus went to heaven to serve in the sanctuary, and the Bible says that he didn't enter by the blood of sheep and goats, but by his own precious blood, then when did he serve in the holy? If he went to the most holy. If the New King James is right, and he went into the most holy, when did he serve in the holy? Because after all, in the earthly, which is a copy of the heavenly, and is a copy of the service in the heavenly, he must have served sometime in the holy. When was that? Well, then it must have been before he came to this earth, right? Because when he left this earth again, he went into the most holy, according to the New King James. Is that right? Okay. Question. With which blood? With which blood did he serve in the holy before he came here? With the blood of sheep and goats? No. So, in other words, Jesus could not have entered the most holy when he went to heaven. He could only have entered the holy. So no matter how much they cry and how much they weep and wail over the fact that 1844 is a prophetic date, they're going to sit with a problem. Jesus could only have gone into the Hagion, sanctuary, holy place, when he went up to heaven, because that's the first time he had his own blood to serve with. That means he must have gone into the most holy at a later stage, and the only date we have is 1844, so 1844 stands, like it or not. Now, round about this date, this important end of time date, or time of the end date at least, during the same period that the remnant preaches a message of separation, Satan sets up a counterfeit of unity. Starting with the French Revolution, remember, he replaces the law of God with his own earthly standard called human rights. And he puts the fascism on there, and he puts the eye of Lucifer, and the all life-giving serpent, and he puts the hat of Mitra on there. So at this time period, we have Freemasonry, spiritualism, theosophy, false prophets, Mormon movement, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian Science movement, and at the same time, God raises up a standard against it, keeping the commandments of God and preaching a three angels message. Only the Seventh-day Adventist Church does this. No other church in the whole world. No other church in the whole world preaches the sanctuary message of what the sanctuary stood for. There's only one church that does it in the whole world, Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's kind of strange. Interesting events around 1844. Karl Marx, he joined the League of the Just in 1842, later the League of Communists, and he started writing the Communist Manifesto in 1844. What does that say? It says there is no God, let alone Jesus Christ. Let's get rid of him. So Jesus Christ is removed. Same time, another message goes into the world. Darwin, the origin of species. The origin of species, that mystery of mysteries. When did he start writing it? This is the foreword to The Origin of Species, and you'll find something interesting. I allowed myself to speculate on the subject and drew up some short notes. These are enlarged in 1844. It's very interesting. Second time we find 1844 in a very prominent place, where we have an end-time lying delusion going into the world. And there's a little group that says, no, there are many others as well, but they don't have the fullness of the three angels' message, nor do they have a sanctuary message. Isn't it interesting that the greatest representation at the United Nations, the Baha'i Faith, was found when? By the Bab, there's the date, 1844. The Baha'i Faith was founded in 1844 by Baha'u'llah, a faith founded by the Bab, meaning gate. So 1844, we finally get to a point where the world is ready for a movement which will say all churches unite. Who's behind this movement? That's another story. I think we figured that out by now, because who has the power in the United Nations, they or Roman Catholicism? Roman Catholicism has the power, so this is just a tool. But 1844 is an interesting date. The Baha'i faith upholds the fundamental unity of all religions. That's their first criterion. Independent investigation of truth, blah, 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 and all these interesting things. We've dealt with some of these already. Attainment of world peace, and we've discussed this.
To see this entire video, please contact amazingdiscoveries.org or by phone at 1-866-572-9457 or by fax at 604-599-9949. Our Canadian address is P.O. Box 189, 7101C, 120th Street, Delta, British Columbia, V4E 2A9. Our U.S. address is P.O. Box 4480, Blaine, Washington, 98231.